I'm going to go ahead and get us started and say good morning. Why am I getting us started? I am Laurel Clifford, if you don't know me. I'm resident math faculty here in Havasu, and Havasu is also, we've got some wonderful students in another room. And I'm co-chair of the Strategic Planning Committee here at Mohave Community College. And I want to say thank you for coming to this kickoff of the second phase of our strategic planning for 2025. So strategic planning gives us a chance to identify what are the biggest opportunities we have as a college that we should seize on to help students navigate the changing world. So we're looking forward to what you students will face and what we can do to help you reach your goals. So for those of you who are new to this, thank you for joining us. Welcome. We're delighted to have you with us and your voices in the process. For those of you who are old veterans like me, we're also glad to have you in this process. And I think as an old veteran, it's exciting to have this opportunity to look at our college with new perspective and a fresh outlook. So I hope that folks who've been here a while feel the same way. The Strategic Planning Committee helps facilitate the process, and we provide resources and support, and we gather feedback from all of you, students, faculty, staff, and community members. And we will organize that feedback and identify what the college's biggest priorities are going to be, and that's part of the plan. These priorities are based on your insights and ideas, and this cannot happen without you folks. So I'd like to share a message from me personally about how crucial you are to this process. So let's see if I can get this to work. So my message is you matter. Of course, if there are any science people in here, they may disagree and say something like, unless you multiply yourself by the speed of light squared, and then you energy. Now, I just want to point out that if you take MCC and do a little bit of algebra, just a little bit of algebra, some of you can tell where I'm headed, you're going to get MC squared, which happens to be Einstein's simplified equation for energy. And if y'all weren't muted, you would have told me that. So not only do you matter, you are energy. I'll fix that for the English folks. You are energy. And my message is, whoops, not black screen yet. You matter, and we need your energy. And English people can double check that I got the right your. So I got a math joke in there, a science joke in there, an English correction. You psychology people and social and behavioral sciences can decide whether it was appropriate or not. So just to recognize the other strategic planning people, because we're scattered across all these campuses. Sean, he's in Kingman. Sean is my co-chair, Sean Bristol. He is also the chief of college advancement. Sean, where are you? There he is. There he is. Awesome. Now, on every campus, we should have strategic planning committee members present. So what I'd like to do is have you all stand up at your campus so the folks around know who you are and who's involved. And if you'd wave at us. So stand and wave. So that's a pretty good wave. Although Kingman, we can't see the wave happening, so you guys let the wave down. We have a nice flow going on, but I appreciate all their hard work. And we also have help. We have help to ensure that we get the voices of everyone. That's the cool thing I think about this process for me is we are talking to everyone. And we want everybody involved in our communities. So we have, as a college, selected Campus Works to assist with the process. And who is Campus Works, if you don't know? They're a leading higher ed consulting firm, and they've helped community colleges, technical colleges, big colleges, little colleges all over the nation create their strategic plans. So we've got them because they have experience in this, but also because they have experience making it inclusive. So I'd like to introduce our helper from Campus Works, our consultant, Justin Norris. He's there in Kingman. Justin is a senior optimization expert, very good, with Campus Works. And again, he works with community colleges, technical colleges, liberal arts colleges, big land grant institutions all over the nation. He started his career as a career services professional at University of Pittsburgh, helping to build mentoring networks with alumni and major corporations for first generation and minority students. So that sounds like inclusivity is part of his background. He's a certified trainer with the National Coalition Building Institute, which is a diversity and inclusion training program that was cited by the Department of Education as a best practice for its work with colleges nationally. Justin later became Director of Development and Communications for Seton Hill University and Associate Vice President of Institutional Advancement, where he helped coordinate and lead an $81 million fundraising campaign that built 2 new cultural and academic centers in downtown Greensburg, Pennsylvania. And as part of a town and gown, I thought that was cute, town and gown partnership that revitalized and rebuilt the city's cultural district. As Associate Vice President, Justin helped create and secure funding for the Office of Academic Innovation and Planning, where he oversaw academic research and built relationships with faculty to market or create new market responsive programs. A strategy that positioned the university as the only higher institution education, or let me say that right, Justin, I don't want to butcher this. The only institutions of higher education in the Pittsburgh region to increase its enrollment. Yay! Justin earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in classical music and political science. We did kind of think that Justin and Sean should break out into song, but we won't do that for them. And then he has his law degree from Duquesne University. So I'd like to hand it off to Justin.
You're muted, we can't hear you.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Excellent. And that was sponsored by Sprint and Verizon. So thank you again to all of you for joining us this morning to talk a little bit about the strategic planning process and to also talk a little bit about trends in higher education. And later this afternoon, we'll start really getting into the strategic planning process. We're going to put you to work today with the Student Experience Workshop. Again, to echo Laurel's I did not pay her to say any of that, but to echo certainly her comments, my background, I started in career services as a student affairs professional and went on to become a fundraiser, helping to raise major gifts and commitments for the sciences, for performing and visual arts, as well as overseeing Title III grants, the Strengthening Institutions program, and really working on first generation and minority student success with a lot of the funding that I did. So I really had the opportunity to collaborate with faculty and really dig into what student success is. And so, and certainly what comes with the gig and fundraising is asking for money, right? So I am no stranger to rejection. And in fact, I would probably say I didn't realize how much that skill was going to help me in life until I started dating. So, but I'm grateful to be here, and certainly we're happy to be here. I also have on the line with me today, once I turn things on and unmute them, Kevin David, who is also with Campus Works. We're both a part of the strategic planning consultancy at Campus Works. And Kevin came from Tulsa Community College as a campus provost and was instrumental in implementing guided pathways. He was also an Aspen Institute Presidential Fellow I'm sure many of you know Aspen Institute and the work that they're doing with community colleges.
We're not sharing the screen right now.
All right, and there we go. Got some technical difficulties. There we go. Excellent. So, and Kevin will be joining us at the Bullhead City campus a little bit later this afternoon for the student experience workshop. So you'll see him around, particularly as we go through what is really going to be a 9-month journey with strategic planning. And just to get out of the way, in case you're wondering, yes, I'm related to Chuck Norris. And Uncle Chuck has allowed me to give you all as a freebie a free Bowflex. So you're welcome. I don't have. Do any of you remember the Bowflex commercials?
Oh yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
with Christy Brinkley. So no, I'm not actually related to Chuck Norris, but I certainly get that. I probably am more likely to be related to Dan DeVito than Chuck Norris. So what are we doing today? What are we talking about? We're really talking about with strategic planning an opportunity for you to all envision the future of Mohave Community College. And I just want to kind of stop for a minute and tell you how much I love community colleges, and certainly how much I've come to love Mohave Community College in such a short time. I didn't go to a community college, but I will tell you, community college changed my life and changed my family's life. I was sharing with Sherry from the nursing program a little bit earlier today that, I grew up in a very poor, rural farm town in Maryland. I grew up on a tobacco farm, and tobacco farms have since died out because of the Philip Morris lawsuits, and rightfully so. But it grew up in a very isolated kind of backwater place. I mean, the only way to get to the main road was a 1-mile dirt road to a piece of asphalt, and to get anywhere. And so, I grew up with hand-me-downs from cousins, and I grew up in the late 80s. So the hand-me-downs weren't particularly appealing. They were the orange and purple jean shorts, and my cousins were always twice the size that I was. So I was just walking around school like this all day, trying to wear them. But my mother was a secretary in a hospital, and her boss came to her one day. She said, you really should be a nurse. You have what it takes to be a nurse. And my mom thought about it. She went to the local community college, the College of Southern Maryland, looked at funding, found out she could get a Pell Grant. And then she also found out that what the Pell Grant didn't cover, the hospital would help make up for her. And so she started in the nursing program, and she had to take the placement tests, right? The math and English placement tests. And she didn't know if she could make it. And it was a nursing instructor who said, once she got into her anatomy and physiology, you were born for this. This is your calling. You really need to become a nurse. And I say that because my mother did not have the confidence to pursue higher education. And it took 2 people, it took 2 conversations to believe in her, to say, I believe in you. And that is so much of the work that we do here with community colleges. Your commodity as community college instructors, as student affairs professionals, even as HR and finance and advancement people, your commodity is not education. It's not learning. You really are merchants of hope. And I cannot stress enough, and I just want to say thank you to all of you, because I would not have gone to a 4-year institution. I would not have gone to college if it wasn't for my mother's own community college education. And certainly, I had to say to her, okay, you really loved it that much. You got to give back, Mom. It was a fundraiser to me. But it is to say that the work that you're doing is so important. And so a lot of the work that we do, and I work a lot with community colleges, particularly around strategic planning. We have about 5 to 7 clients right now that we're helping build strategic plans for in community colleges. And it is so rewarding to be a partner with all of you. And that's really what we are as consultants. We're not here to be experts. We're here to be partners with you and to help shepherd for you a process that you can go down a road where you have included all of the voices into a strategic plan. Because ultimately, if you don't have ownership over the strategic plan and you don't have the momentum now in the planning process, how are you ever going to get to the finish line 5 years later? And that is really what Campus Works is about. We don't want to just imagine the future. We want to help you create it. And that's really going to take all hands on deck to talk about what the shared vision of this institution will be. One of the things that we know about community colleges, and certainly about higher education in general, is that there's really a struggle to be relevant right now. There's acceleration going on. Technology is accelerating, and it's the innovation and the invention that's coming with technology and the ways in which people are adapting it is increasing and increasing. And that's causing us to have to run and catch up. And so in some ways, the world was once had square holes, right? And we were the square pegs that fit them. But the world began to change. And suddenly there are now circles. We have to fit within those circles. And we know that we can't fit a square peg in a round hole. Anybody know what this is? Remember this? What is it? Blockbuster. What happened to Blockbuster? Died. They're no longer relevant. They got Netflix, right? They got Netflix. And in fact, Blockbuster had the opportunity to invest in Netflix and turned it down. They said, oh, they will never be anything. There's no growth opportunities there. Well, I think you might want to rethink that, Blockbuster. The ability to be relevant is so crucial, particularly as we think about the marketplace, as we think about how fast things are moving and how we can respond to it. Anyone remember these? These have kind of come back in style, right? My niece has been wanting one, which is really kind of sad because I remember when it first came out. And I used to play with them as a kid, and it's almost like fountain pens or quill pens, right? There's this kind of novelty about it because it's historical and it's fun. And oh, I can take a piece of film, flap it a little bit. I got a picture. What a novelty. But it is to say that Polaroid, again, Kodak had an opportunity, and Polaroid had an opportunity and turned it down, right? That they didn't think that there were growth opportunities. And so when we're talking about imagining the future and creating the future, we're also talking about how can we be relevant. Anyone remember these? Yes. They make for great kindling in my house. I get so frustrated, particularly I don't know what it was about living in Pittsburgh, but I constantly got yellow pages at my doorstep 4 or 5 times a year. I have no idea why, but I just would get so frustrated, right? And so if it wasn't in my fireplace, it was in my trash can. This really became irrelevant. And why was that? Google, right? Google, you didn't need this anymore. And so what we are really conflating, one of the things that we know is that the World Economic Forum posted a statistic that children who are under the age of 5 today, 65% of them will work in jobs that don't even exist today. That is the kind of world in which we're living when we talk about acceleration, because things are moving so quickly and things are changing so quickly that we don't even know what's on the horizon yet. And I love this quote from Shift Happens, which is a YouTube channel. We're educating students for jobs that don't exist, using technology that has not been invented yet, to solve problems that haven't been identified. And particularly in the community college space, we're doing less of it, or we're doing it with less of it, right? When the recession occurred, what happened to enrollment? It went up. What happened to state appropriations? It went down, right? And so what we saw in that, particularly among community colleges and public institutions, was you had this huge influx of students that you had to serve now, but you had to do it with less resources. And so what does that do to an institution? All of that work begins to start trickling down in the institution. And people are struggling to cope with all of the growth that just happened and all the students, the additional students that they need to serve without any of the money that they have to serve them, right? And particularly in 2009, what I saw, particularly from a philanthropy perspective, was foundations shifted their strategies. They were investing in economic development, and they were investing in really kind of what are the next generation initiatives, and they stopped and they put that on hold, and they started investing in human services, and they started investing in basic services for people, anti-poverty, and emergency funds and nonprofits across the country. And so what we were doing in community colleges at the time of the recession and on was trying to not only serve students, but they had a lot more needs that came along with it. And so it wasn't just about their academic experience and their student experience. It was about helping them cope with a new uncertainty in their life, and certainly, particularly with income disparities. So we're going to do a little exercise. I'm going to have you all stand up, and hopefully everyone at at Bullhead City and Havasu and North Mohave can see me as well. So if we can all stand up. Come on, out a little bit, right? Little long hearing me talk. Okay. So what we're going to do, I want you to stand with your feet firmly planted. Get them nice and firmly planted. I know some of you can't see me, but I'll try to be as explicit as I can with instructions. And I want you to hold your finger out like this in front of you. Now, what I want you to do, don't do it yet, I'll model it for you, is I want you to take your finger and I want you to just point it and keep tracking your finger all the way around. And I want you to go as far as you can. And once you've gone as far as you can, I want you to stop for a minute, memorize where it is. Maybe it's a place on the wall. Maybe it's a person, right? Just don't hit anybody. We can't have HR giving us lawsuits. Okay, so come back now, and we're going to do it this time for real. Then we've done a little practice run. So hold your finger out, and let's go all the way behind us and go as far as you can. Hold it right there. Memorize that spot. Maybe it's on the wall, maybe it's a person, and come back around. You didn't realize you're getting calisthenics like this, did you? Okay, put your finger down. Keep your feet firmly planted. Now I want you to close your eyes. Close your eyes. Keep your feet firmly planted. And I want you to do the same exercise. Okay, and you don't have to do it in real life. Do it in your mind's eye. Do the same exercise in your mind's eye. Hold your finger out in your mind's eye. And I want you to go back and go all the way behind you the same way that you did. And I want you to keep going until you stop at that place that you remembered. I want you to stop at that place in your mind's eye. Now I want you to go in your mind's eye an extra inch and hold it there. And now in your mind's eye, I want you to go another inch, 2 inches past where you initially were, the place that you memorized. I want you to go 1 more inch and hold it there. Now bring your arm back around in your mind's eye and put it down. I want you to open your eyes. Now we're going to do it again. Hold your finger up. And this time I want you to go as far as you can. And we're just going to keep going until we can go as far as we can. So let's rotate around and keep going and go as far as you can. And as far as you can and hold it. Now bring it back. How many of you went further than the first time around? Okay, for some people, maybe not, but for most everyone, right? When you visualized what you could do, and you can sit back down now. You can tell your personal trainer you got a little exercise in today. The power, right? In terms of visualizing what the power of vision can do, this is what strategic planning is all about. It is about taking and pushing ourselves to visualize how far we can go and trying to make that a reality. Because one of the things that we know when it comes to strategic planning is if we can dream and be ambitious about where we get to at 100%, maybe we won't get to 100%, and that's okay. But maybe we will get to 80%. And if we didn't push ourselves to visualize what the future looked like, we might have only gotten to 40%. That's a pretty cool exercise, right? You don't realize what the power of visualization can do until you see how the real impact, the benefit of it is in real life. And you begin to see these things come to life. And so there's a very practical purpose to the power of vision. So our role at CampusWorks, when we think about all of the barriers that impact student success, that impact your ability to really make students successful, when you think about policies from the state level, funding, when you think about even what gets in the way here at Mohave Community College, and all of that starts to overgrow. And a lot of times what we find is, particularly with strategic initiatives and strategic planning, the role of strategic planning historically in higher education really has kind of been meant to serve an accreditation purpose, right? Most accreditors require a strategic plan. And so some community colleges have really implemented strategic plans to serve accreditation purposes. And a lot of colleges now are beginning to see, and this is not really just an accreditation thing that we put on the shelf and we make it beautiful. This is something that can actually help us focus and channel the energy of the institution to move forward with big initiatives that we want to get done. And so our role from a CampusWorks perspective is to take all of that messiness and to help you facilitate a way to navigate the world that gives you a clear path to what success looks like for Mohave Community College in the next 5 years. And that what success looks like is going to help you to address an uncertain future. Not just the future and what the world will look like in 5 years, but a future in terms of what the world will look like in 10 years. And how do we position the institution in a way that gets you ready for those 10 years? That when you show up at the doorstep of the year 2030, you're saying, we're ready. We're ready because we invested, we channeled our resources, and we channeled our energy in a way that got us to the finish line. And the strategic plan is really the first step in doing that. So our approach at CampusWorks, one of the things that we have often found, as I was talking about a recession that increased enrollment and brought down state appropriations, what that created in a lot of institutions was really a top-down culture. And we often found that strategic plans were top-down approaches. And again, part of that is because of the role that it served with accreditation as well, right? Let's get it done and let's send it to the accreditors. We take a very different approach because we do believe in the value that strategic plans have for colleges, and that we take an approach that's inclusive and engaging, and that we want to hear the voices. One of the things that we started out with, particularly with this engagement, was the SWOT survey, right? And you all had a chance to really talk about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities that you saw for the college, and threats. We had students who were able to participate, and we also had community partners. And so that was really kind of the first foray into trying to create some of that broad engagement, in addition to the all-staff day that many of you attended on September 6th. And so that will really be the bedrock of the CampusWorks process, and particularly why Mohave selected us as a partner, was to create that kind of engagement. And so you'll see that in a number of ways. You'll see that in surveys, you'll see that in listening and focus groups. You'll see that when we get to the strategy drafting stage. We believe that drafting the strategies for the institution really belongs to the whole institution. And we will have some time in January with the Future Summit where you will help support the strategy drafting as a community, as a college community here at Mohave. And we'll invite external voices in as well. We also believe in transparency. The things that you will hear about, things like the SWOT survey, any of the strategic planning committee meetings, will all be available online through the strategic planning website. And so that you have an opportunity to really understand, point for point, how the institution got to the destination that it's getting to. And particularly because we want to be able to have candid conversations. Some of the work that we will do as part of strategic planning may require hard conversations, and it may require being candid and allowing everyone in the room to really kind of talk about some of those conversations, to have those conversations, and to really think through and strategize what are the challenges that students are experiencing, that internal faculty and staff are experiencing. What are the perceptions of the community and our community partners? And how do we start to address those challenges? We believe in a process where we start out with really talking about learning and keeping open minds, open to the different possibilities, and really listening to the ideas that everyone has around the table. Part of this process certainly is the work that we'll do today in terms of talking about trends. But as we go through an iterative process, what you will also see is that we're doing more and more research, and we're digging a little bit deeper. So from the SWOT survey, how do we take that and look and dig with a little bit more research in both the Future Summit, where we'll have 4 speakers talk about topics that we've prioritized that came out of the SWOT survey. We will also look at a scan to plan research team, where we'll take some of these topics and we'll start to dig a little bit deeper about what's going on in the environment and what will be the responsibility of Mohave to address what is going on in the environment. Data informed, of course, goes along those lines, right? We will rely on data, we'll rely on your feedback throughout this entire process to really inform the work that we're doing. And certainly, we definitely want and encourage, in this process, we hope will encourage innovation and excellence. And that is, how do we engage, how do we empower you that ideas start to come to mind? And we'll particularly see a lot of that when we get a little bit more into the strategic plan, because we'll have the high overall strategies, then we'll have the objectives, and then we'll have the action plans. And so there will be opportunities to weigh in with your thoughts, your ideas, and certainly your expertise here in the way in which you have seen what student success should look like here at the institution.
Thank you.
I think I broke it.
I think we did it.
This would not be the first time I've broken technology. All right, let's see. There we go. How do we do it? What do we look at? One of the things that we talk about with strategic plans is that what we want to create is a plan that has an action or has a bias for action. That everything that we will do along the way in the strategic planning process will build on one aspect of something that you did previously. And so it'll be a waterfall effect from the all-staff day to the SWOT survey to the future summit, which we'll talk a little bit more about. That all of that is really about not wasting your time and using your time efficiently to be able to carry us through and move us forward and create momentum through this process. And one of the ways in which we do it is we look at the mission. And at Campus Works, we believe that the mission is actually owned by the board. Because if you have a board that is going to make important decisions about the institution, wouldn't we want them engaged about what it is that they're doing and the kinds of decisions that they're making? One of the things that will happen, I will tell you, is that the mission work that we do, even though it starts at the board, we will be bringing it back to you as a community and saying, what do you think about this? Tell us your concerns. And we'll bring that back to the board and say, here's what we heard. In fact, tomorrow we have a board meeting where we're going to start looking at the mission statement. And during the all-staff day on September 6th, many of you had an opportunity to weigh in on some of the concerns that you had about the mission or things that you could see differently about the mission. And so we're going to take that feedback tomorrow to the board. We start working on the mission and have them weigh in and really think about, should we revise the mission? And what will a mission look like that gets us to the next 10 years? So the mission is the building block of who you are. And it starts with the board and then carries on to get your feedback. And ultimately, we'll end with the board. The other part of this is the student experience statement. And that's what we're going to do a little bit later today, is talk about what experience do you envision for your students. The student experience statement is usually a one-page aspirational vision statement about what the student experience should look like at Mohave. And it's really an opportunity for students and staff and faculty to come together to construct what they want the ideal experience to look like. And then we'll take that and carry it with us throughout the entire strategic planning process. So when we talk about the initiatives, when we talk about the action plans, we will always be coming back to the student experience statement really as the guiding North Star, as the aspiration that's going to help guide us through some of the strategic planning work. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we believe that the student is really at the center of the Mohave Community College experience. And then we will also work on 3 to 5, we typically recommend from Campus Works, 3 to 5 kind of big rocks, these strategic priorities. And some of these might be things like student success, or maybe there are employee retention and performance management. Maybe that's a big rock. We have seen strategic directions on culture. That's where you all will come in and start to offer your feedback about what should the big rocks be in terms of strategic direction for Mohave. The other part, and this is one of my favorite exercises, is we believe that the values of the college are owned by the employees. And so you all in the spring will have an opportunity to weigh in on what should the values be for the college. And typically we revisit values because we want them to align with the strategic directions of the college, as well as the vision. And so when we have the direction, the experience, the mission statement, the values, we're hoping what it will do for us is to achieve the vision for the college. And again, the vision is something that we see as being started and owned by the board, but that you will have the opportunity to weigh in. What should be our guiding North Star overall for the college? Where should we be going? What is our aspiration? And how do we make sure that we've built a plan that is going to get us there? You know, do we want to go to Boston or do we want to go to Europe? Right? And we're going to think about those big, hairy, audacious goals and how we ensure that we meet those goals through a vision statement. So just to give you a little bit of an overview around the planning process, we have the all-staff day and student experience workshop, which was in September. And that was represented with people from all campuses. And today we'll have the student experience workshops. One of the other things that we have had, many of you participated in the SWOT survey, there are also going to be listening sessions for employees, for students, as well as for community partners that are going to go around all 4 campuses. So be on the lookout for those. Some of those have already started. Then we're having mission and vision board workshops, where we are going to work with the board to start looking at the mission and vision and have them decide, do you even want to revise it? You know, we'll start with that question. And then really start to dig into what the board is saying. We will bring that back to the college. The Future Summit is a half-day event, and hopefully many of you have this on your calendars already. It's a half-day event, and what we will do from the SWOT survey and from the staff feedback from all staff day is we're taking all that data with the Strategic Planning Committee, and CampusWorks has helped look at that data, code it, and bring out themes that came out of the data. And from those themes, we're going to start looking at what are called Future Summit topics. And these are a list of 10 to 13 topics that came out of the data from the SWOT survey that you all contributed to. And what we're going to do is we're going to take those, prioritize them based on the data that we have, and we're going to look for 4 topics. And these 4 topics are what we call Ed Talks. You like TED Talks? Ed Talks? You like that? And so the Ed Talks are really 12-minute kind of inspirational, thought-provoking topics from speakers who are leaders in a particular area that came out of the SWOT survey and the all-staff day feedback. And so they'll provide talks, 12-minute talks, and in the afternoon, after those 4 talks, we're all going to get together as a community in one of those 4 topic areas, and we're going to start creating what are called impact statements. And impact statements are really kind of the seed that get us started with drafting strategies. So from the Future Summit, that we're going to take all of that data, create those topics, and then from those topics, we'll have those impact statements. And those impact statements will help us start to draft strategies. And so you can see through this process, this waterfall process, we're taking it iteratively based on the feedback. And so you all will have feedback to provide during that January 13th day. And it is a fun day. I have to say, it is probably one of my favorite days to do in strategic planning, because it gets everyone excited and geared up about what they've heard. And then we'll take those impact statements and we'll start looking at scan to plan. And the scan to plan research is what's really going to help us start to draft strategies. So everything we're taking, all of the information that you're providing along the way is being fed up to the strategies. So by February, what we will have, and we don't have campuses or schedules aligned yet for these, but by February, what you will have are both the values workshop and the strategy development workshop. Those will occur hand in hand. And the strategy development workshop will again be those 3 to 5 big rocks that you all as an institution want to pursue. And from there, so we have the strategies, which are kind of the big rocks. We will have objectives, and objectives are kind of what are your goals? What are the things that you want to move? Maybe an objective for you is you want to increase retention from 55% to 60% in 5 years. Totally making that up. So any of the student success people in the audience, please don't freak out just yet. But that might be a particular objective that you want to look at and say, this is what we want to move the needle on. And we'll start developing that once we've got the big rocks in place. And then from there will be action plans. So each part of this process, again, you will have an opportunity to weigh in. And there will be surveys along the way that get your feedback. So we'll continue to validate everything that we've heard from you, and you'll have an opportunity to respond through this. So again, just to share with you, the board really has the role of looking at the mission and vision, and they will also approve, as part of their responsibility as a governance body, they will approve the overall strategic plan, which will include your mission, your vision, your values, and your strategies. And sometimes some boards want to also approve the objectives that follow, but we'll have that conversation. The faculty, staff, and students will create the ideal student experience statement, and then faculty and staff will be responsible for values, strategies, objectives, which we sometimes call KPIs, because they're kind of the big KPIs that you all will want to look at, action plans, and then the tactics under that. So in this, your voice matters, and it's going to matter the entire way through this process. So we hope that you'll keep a lookout for some of the surveys that will come. We hope you'll participate in the future summit and really lend your voice as part of this process. And certainly to echo Laurel, your energy certainly matters and your enthusiasm. And so I just want to say thank you again for being a part of this process and showing up, because this is really lost my train of thought. This is really the battle that we are going to really start to develop momentum, right? And so it starts today with us being in the room and building on that and building on that and building on that until we start to get into implementation. And sometimes that's where the real work happens, right? Is the implementation. And we will not lose sight of that. That is a big part of the work that we do with Campus Works is, okay, great, you got a plan, right? And it's a plan that fits in your pocket, but how do we actually make it live? And that's going to be a lot of the work that we will help support you on, is thinking through what the implementation looks like and not just developing the plan. So with that said, I have a little help from a friend, a colleague, if you will, who's probably taller than me by now. I just love this pep talk. Anyone ever heard of Kid President? Yes.
Want an unbelievable deal? Get Suddenlink TV and internet for $49.99 a month. Enjoy must-see TV, fast internet, and free equipment. All with no annual contract. Only at Suddenlink. Click now.
I think we all need a pep talk. The world needs you to stop being boring. Yeah, you. Boring is easy. Everybody can be boring, but you're gooder than that. Life is not a game, people. Life isn't a series.
Where did you go? Well,
He's lost in the ether.
we got the
No, it should not have gotten.
Right, thank you.
Oops. Try this again.
Cereal eater.
Oh.
And it's like boring is easy. Everybody.
All right. There we go. There. All right.
It can be boring, but you're gooder than that. Life is not a game, people. Life isn't a cereal. All need a pep
Let's try this
talk.
again. I clearly didn't.
The world needs you to stop being boring. Yeah, you. Boring is easy. Everybody can be boring, but you're gooder than that. Life is not a game, people. Life isn't a cereal either. Well, it is a cereal. And if life is a game, aren't we all on the same team? I mean, really, right? I'm on your team. Be on my team. This is life, people. You got air coming through your nose. You got heartbeat. That means it's time to do something. A poem. Two roads diverged in the woods, and I took the road less traveled. It hurt, man! Really bad. Rocks, thorns, and glass. My parts broke. Wah! Not cool, Robert Frost. But what if there really were two paths? I want to be the one that leads to awesome. It's like that dude Journey said, don't stop believing, unless you dream stupid. Then you should get a better dream. I think that's how it goes. Get a better dream and keep going. Keep going, and keep going. What if Michael Jordan have quit? Well, he did quit. No, he retired. Yeah, that's he retired. But before that, in high school, what if he quit when he didn't make the team? He would have never made Space Jam. And I love Space Jam. What will be your Space Jam? What will you create will make the world awesome? Nothing if you keep sitting there. That's why I'm talking to you today. This is your time. This is my time. It's our time. We can make every day better for each other. If we're all on the same team, let's start acting like it. We got work to do. We can cry about it, or we can dance about it. We were made to be awesome. Let's get out there. I don't know everything. I'm just a kid. But I do know this. It's everybody's duty to give the world a reason to dance. So get to it. You've just been pep talked. Create something that will make the world awesome. Play ball. Oh, hi, everybody. We're all working hard to make this an awesome year for other people. And you guys are doing it. You've been super encouraging to me, so I want to return the favor. You know who needs some encouragement? Pass this pep talk along, and let's get the whole world to dance. I'm dedicating this video today to my friend Gabby. She's a cool kid, she likes pancakes, and she's fighting cancer like a boss. And to all you watching, who encourages you? Send them this video and let them know. So get to it. Bye.
So now that you've been pep talked, let's talk a little bit about what are the issues that are facing higher education. And let me see if I can resume share here. Oops. I promise to be an expert at Zoom by the end of this. Oops. Okay.
I'm not sharing.
I'm not sharing. There we go.
You did that all by yourself.
I did. Thank you. Thank you. I finally got it. So you can teach an old dog new tricks. from current slide. All right, so we've been pep talks. Part of this is the learning phase. And part of what we want to talk about with trends in higher education are what are the issues that are facing us right now in higher education? And what can we potentially do about it as institutions of higher education? So one of the things that we'll talk a little bit about are really what are the trends, understand technology and how technology is facing, or how higher education institutions are really facing technology trends, understanding the landscape, and really thinking about and inspiring new thoughts and ideas. Maybe this gives you some seeds that begin to plant in some new thoughts and ideas. And maybe for some of you, this is old hat, right? But one of the things that we often like to do with the trends in higher education is really all get on the same page, because we all have different areas of expertise. Whether you're from financial aid, whether you're from CTE or academic affairs, whether you're from HR, finance. And so what are the big issues that are affecting institutions? And how do we look at those? Big surprise, right? Economics and accountability. Costs are continuing to go up in terms of tuition, and yet states are continually underfunding higher education. And who's at the top of the list? Right? And I didn't have to tell you that. You feel it. You've been feeling it. How many of here were here in 2009, 2008? So some of you have really experienced the impact of this years ago when you were on the front lines. And this is something that we see at a lot of institutions. Particularly, we were talking a little bit about Michigan institutions, and I just came from Michigan, from the community college there. And not only are they experiencing decreasing appropriations, but they're also experiencing real significant population challenges. There aren't enough high school graduates. And certainly what we see in other parts of the nation is that may be stabilizing a little bit, but the Northeast and the Midwest in particular are experiencing significant population declines. But appropriations has been a big challenge. And one of the issues is what the aging population is going to look like in the next couple of years. Because one of the things that have been pushing out higher education funding has been Medicare and Medicaid spending, as well as pension. And so when you have an aging population that are going to start to draw down on their liabilities for pensions and are going to increase the use of Medicaid and Medicare, it really creates a lot of questions about what the future is going to look like in terms of state funding. Debt. We see that there's been significant public opinion about debt. And when people talk about student loan debt, do they say, oh, yeah, students are experiencing significant loan debt, except community college students? Do they ever say that? No, we all get lumped in, right, with the institutions that are charging significantly more debt, and that's really impacted public opinion. Does that mean that students take out debt at community colleges? Sure, but is it at the level that other institutions do, particularly for-profit institutions? One of the things that we saw in the last couple of years in looking at debt is that the biggest chunks of debt that students have incurred have come from for-profit institutions. And so that has significantly impacted the way in which people look at higher education. 59% of people today say that colleges today are like most businesses, and they care mainly about the bottom line. And 34% say they mainly care about education and making sure that students have a good educational experience. We know that we are experiencing a perception issue, right? And that is really going to be key to the way in which we operate. But, I will say but, there's a bright spot. People see community colleges favorably. So while they may talk about colleges very monolithically, they are saying that community colleges do still provide value to the nation and to the workforce, and that 83% contribute to a strong workforce that are worth the cost, 82%, and that they prepare people to be successful. So that's something that we can lean on a little bit. One of the other things that we see because of public opinion is the way in which states are changing their funding formulas. So not only have appropriations come down in some states, but the level of accountability has gone up. Some states are actually tying funding to things like graduation and retention rates. And so if you are in a state, particularly a state where this is in place at 2-year institutions, which is the orange here, orange, or a state where 2- and 4-year institutions have these performance-based funding models, student success becomes even more critical to funding the institution from states. And so completion rates and retention rates become a significant part of that. Luckily, Arizona, the performance-based funding is only at 4-year institutions. I don't know if that's changed at all or not. It hasn't, okay. So, but it certainly leaves the possibility, will they follow suit with other states? And is that an uncertainty that we have to brace ourselves for? And what will that look like? Declining student enrollment. We certainly see across the nation, the student enrollment is declining. Here in the US, enrollment's pretty much flattened out. When you look at the National Clearinghouse education data, it shows that there are continually year-over-year decreases in enrollment. When you look at Arizona, enrollments have declined overall. And certainly at Mohave, there's been enrollment declines. And so how are we going to look at an era where we have declining enrollments, and how are we going to navigate a world in which we're having increased accountability, right? That people have certain perceptions of us, that funding is going to be tied to certain performance indicators, and yet we have to do that without having more students and the resources to do that. And this is just showing you some of the percentage declines. Another trend that we see across the country is free college tuition. And one of the things that we hear from institutions certainly is, where's that money going to come from, right? Because legislators, they started in 2008 by cutting back our budgets, and now it kind of looks like a shell game, right? It's a sleight of hand. We're going to give you more money, and we're going to give it to you in the form of free community college. And sometimes that is tied to, particularly I saw this in New York. We have a client in New York where they created scholarships, the Excelsior scholarships, and the requirements were so burdensome that no one could actually get scholarships with a very small number of students. And so what does the promise look like of free college tuition? And it's not to say that there isn't promise there. I don't want to sound like a negative Nancy, because we've seen successful models in the country as well. Tennessee, for example, has provided free college tuition, and they are a particular model because they've been much more open about who gets that scholarship dollars. And so how do we think about, when we look at these trends, we are constantly thinking about what is the uncertainty? And if we're going to create a strategic plan, how do we address that uncertainty? Which way is the wind shifting in Arizona? Which way is the wind shifting in our policy environment? And how do we talk about these particular trends and what they may look like for us and for Mohave? The completion agenda. This has really become huge, right? How many of you, I'm sure many of you remember seeing that President Obama talk about the completion agenda in one of the State of the Union addresses, right? So that it's gotten some national attention, even from the top. And since then, there has been a significant movement of people to talk about college completion. And certainly in the administration now, vocational education, career technical education. So in particular, in Mohave, we see that graduation rates, and again, this is IPEDS data, so this is why it's up and down like this, because it's a small number of students, right? So it's not representative of the student body, but it is representative of full-time, first-time students. Students who are probably most likely to have higher graduation rates than other students. But what we kind of see is just I put a trend line in here, just to say, for the most part, if you average all of this out, there's kind of an evening out of graduation rates. But what we are seeing is that graduation rates are moving up a little bit in the country. And a lot of that has to do, particularly with the reforms that are going on across the country, and particularly on the Eastern Coast, the guided pathways work. How many of you have been involved in guided pathways or doing, are you all doing guided pathways here? Okay. So a lot of that has happened on the East Coast primarily, and it's now starting to get to the West Coast. One of the biggest reasons certainly has been funding. The foundation community did not want to fund some of the West Coast states initially because they were concerned about governance, right? How do you make guided pathways happen? And they didn't feel like the leadership, particularly in California, was all that strong. But now it's made its way there, and it's certainly making its way on the West Coast. But guided pathways has been a real significant component in terms of how do we get students to completion, and what does that look like? And so with guided pathways, I heard a national speaker talk about guided pathways, and he said there are 4 things you should know about guided pathways. We need to get them in, we need to keep them in, we need them to learn something, and we need to get them out. That is guided pathways. It's a little overly simplistic, I know. But it is to say that are there opportunities to ensure that when students come to campus, that they have a structured pathway, that they have a way of being able to navigate campus and to navigate the college experience. Because one of the things that we see across the nation is that students are plagued with self-doubt, right? Am I college material? Can I do this? And so one of the first places that they experience college, a lot of the times, is in financial aid with the FAFSA form, which is just tremendous fun, right? How many have filled out the FAFSA form? How many were excited to do it? Oh, you must have an accountant in the back. Oh, financial aid. Yeah, and with students, particularly young college students, who have never had anyone in their life who's a role model or who's been through college, and now they have to navigate this process called financial aid. And sometimes the government calls you up and says, hey, we want to verify your income. And suddenly students think they're in trouble, right? And some colleges experience verification mode. And then they have to go and pick a major. How many majors do you have here? 30 some majors? That's not actually bad. I've heard some colleges say 200 programs. So a lot of students are struggling with how do you navigate those programs. How many of you have been to Cheesecake Factory? I don't have any cheesecake for you, I'm sorry. How many of you remember the Cheesecake Factory menu? What do you remember about it? It's massive, right? It is massive. The Cheesecake Factory binder, that's a good word for it. Binder is massive. How do you make choices when you've got that many options? What Cheesecake Factory found out was people pick 4 things from the menu: BLTs, burgers, pizza, and salads. They were so overwhelmed with the Cheesecake Factory menu that they just went back to the basics. Things that you could get at Applebee's with a much smaller menu, they were getting at the Cheesecake Factory. So what did the Cheesecake Factory do? They put tabs on their menus. Burgers, pizzas, salads. I don't think there's a BLT one, but pastas. Oh, we got a pro here, in case you were wondering. So what do? They architect a choice, right? We know from behavioral economics that people can only handle 3 to 7 options before they experience paralysis, right? Choice paralysis. And so if students are going, and I hate to be funny and liken academic programs to the Cheesecake Factory menu, but for some students, that is what they experience, right? They come in as a transfer student, and sometimes they get this long catalog list and it says, hey, select 3 classes from this list of 50 classes for English, and figure out how to put it all together. And that's really a lot of the work with guided pathways, is to create those structured pathways. Sometimes people call them meta majors or communities of interest, where you lump programs together in these communities of interest or these meta majors to help students really kind of find their way through. And so that is a lot of the work that is going on. And so what community colleges are doing is what we're at a time in terms of, if you look at AACC and the Aspen Institute, what we call Community College 3.0. The mission of the community college, when they first began, and really when they took hold in the 60s, was about access, right? How do we give everyone an opportunity in the country to access higher education? And then we didn't also worry about access, but completion. How do we ensure that students are getting out? And today, what a lot of community colleges are really focused on is access, completion, and where students are going. Do they have the right skills when they leave community college today? And are we preparing them for employment with family-sustaining wages? You know, I kind of talked about the example of my own family. And my life changed because my mother was able to help me afford a college education. That is the power of family-sustaining wages. And that is ultimately what community colleges are trying to do with students. And so what are the 4 things that community colleges are looking at? And this comes from the Aspen Institute, which gives a $1 million award in terms of student outcomes, the Aspen Prize. Everyone heard of the Aspen Prize? $1 million would be nice, right? And they give it to an institution that has shown significant progress in really meeting these objectives, which are learning outcomes. I bet if I looked at your learning outcomes, there'd be some pretty common similarities with other learning outcomes from other institutions. Communication would probably be one of them. I'm looking at the chief academic officer. Critical thinking, right? Computation skills, and maybe collaboration. And yeah, but the first 3, right? Critical thinking, computation, and communication. Thank you for reminding me. Those are ultimately what we hear from employers across the country, is that what they really need and what they are lacking most are students who have communication, critical thinking, computation skills, some soft skills. And those are the things that we as community colleges, when you talk about liberal arts and what the liberal arts does, I would argue that the liberal arts has never been more important in colleges than today. And it's primarily because of these skills and what employers say that they're looking for that's at the top of their list. And so learning outcomes, how do you help students learn the right skills for the right kind of jobs? The other thing that we also are hearing from employers are digital skills, right? Digital literacy. And primarily when you look at things like traditional careers, the people who are leaving traditional careers, a lot of employers are upskilling those jobs and looking for people who have those soft skills and those digital literacy skills, right? Healthcare, nursing. You look at all of the electronic medical records. work that you have to do as part of healthcare, right? But cultural competency has been another big kind of cornerstone in healthcare. And how do you ensure that people understand and navigate a changing and diverse world? And so those communication skills, those soft skills, as well as those digital literacy skills have become really important. Completion outcomes and labor market outcomes, and certainly equity outcomes. How do we ensure that when students go through and they're learning something and we are getting them to where they are going, that we are bringing along all students? One of the things that we know that institutions are really faced with are states that have changed their agenda and have talked about educational attainment. Most states now have a goal about what educational attainment they need, right? Some of them are 55% of a workforce that has certificates, that have some form of associates, bachelor's degrees, or more. And if we are going to get to an economy which is requiring more and more skills, if we're going to have the right workforce, one of the things that states are beginning to recognize, in fact, I just came from Massachusetts, which has actually implemented this in their Department of Higher Education, is that we have to bring people along who are facing disparities. And those are disparities by race and ethnicity, but also disparities by income. Pell students, non-Pell students. One of the staggering statistics that I just recently heard was for students who have the same test scores and have test scores that make them college ready. The students who are in the top quintile for community colleges of income, those students who are in the top quintile, usually 70% of them will graduate, complete, and transfer. For students who are in the bottom quintile of income, who have the same exact test scores, no difference in ability, only about 26% of them graduate. And certainly there are students who are in that quintile from a race and ethnicity standpoint, but how do we change that? How do we do better as a country? And that is a big national conversation that we're having. The rise of data. Who's from IR? I think I saw Matt. Matt, right? Yes. And Bob. And Bob. Great. So this, the rise of data. Everyone is asking for data, right? iPads. These are just some accreditation bodies. Achieving the Dream, Student Clearinghouse, AACC Pathways, Completion by Design, the National Community College Benchmark Project, College Scorecard, the Chronicle of Higher Education, CESI, Noah Levitz, the College Board, Civitas, Blackboard Analytics, maybe it's your learning analytics, Starfish, oops, right? I'm sure our IR people are tired because there's so much compliance with having to provide data. Certainly the Arizona, what is your Board of Higher Education? Do you have a Board of Higher Education kind of oversight that you have to report to?
No.
Oh, you are lucky. Yeah, so the rise of data has become so crucial. And one of the things that we find, particularly in community colleges, in Campus Works, we help community colleges with, is how to use your data. How do you have conversations around the table with academics and student success officers, as well as other areas, finance, HR, to talk about how do you put all of your data together and look at it from a way that drives outcomes for student success. But we are increasingly experiencing a world that is asking us for a lot of data. And how do we begin to use that data has really been a big challenge. And I love this slide because a lot of institutions, in terms of their maturity in working with data, are certainly climbing the ladder from data, right? What is the raw data, to information. How much? Maybe I'm counting how many students do certain things. How many students are retained. That may be information. To knowledge and wisdom, where we're beginning to look at analytics. And how can I think about when I see a student who's falling behind somewhere, how can I ensure that I'm there for them and that I can be a support for them. And maybe they don't feel comfortable asking for the help, right? And so how do we help them probably before they even know it? Because sometimes, some students, they get a failing grade in a course or midterm. And we all know as higher education professionals, it might be too late for that student for that course, right? But they may not know it. And so how are we helping to support them? Right? And how are we using data to do that? Social media. Is there anyone in here? I'm talking to the students because I see so many of you. Are there any students that don't have a social media account? Of any kind? We have one taker over here, right? I didn't hear anything. But social media has become such an important part of the experience. Anyone know what this day is or was? Facebook? Any other takers? I think I heard it. The iPhone watch, right? This has changed so much of how we communicate and the way that we do business. And by the way, don't get me flagged for not having a case on my phone. I know, I'm living on the edge. But it's to say that personal social media, but the way in which the iPhone has helped to accelerate social media and mobile devices has changed the way in which we work at college campuses and the way that our students experience the world. One of the things that we've certainly heard is most students own some form of mobile technology, or at least some technology, right? You've got half up here who have all three devices, a laptop, smartphone, and tablet. Some who have laptop and tablet. A good portion have a laptop and smartphone, and smartphone. Huge number of students have some sort of form of mobile device. And so how do we deliver an education that reaches them? And before we even get here, one of the big things that some students are even experiencing before we talk about mobile devices is broadband, right? There's just some areas in the country that still don't even have broadband. And I don't know, has that been some of the experience here in the region? That's still an issue. So some people rely on mobile devices to help them to have some connectivity because of broadband issues. And so how do we create that experience where they're able to plug into the educational experience with using mobile devices, and how do we meet them where they're at? One of the things that we also see is that what tools students are using, right? That they're using YouTube, and Instagram, and Facebook. I bet that number's probably come down a little bit, right? All the older folks are on Facebook now. My grandmother is a Facebook pro. She is 84 years old and is constantly messaging me on Facebook and calling me on Facebook. And obviously you've seen what I can do with Zoom, so you can only imagine what I can do with Facebook or not do. But the way in which we are meeting students where they are at, and all of this connectivity and technology isn't just about how do we meet students where they're at, right? How do we use YouTube? But it has changed the expectations of students so that the learning experience they are really asking for today is really about connectivity, collaboration, crowdsourcing, right? We live in an age where we have GoFundMes and where there are crowdsourcing apps. I think I just heard about Smule. Anyone heard of Smule? I'm the music geek in the room. Evidently, you can sing with people on an app, right? You can have duets with people. And so you can crowdsource anything. And those are changing the educational expectations of our students because of the way in which we can work with technology. One of the other things that it's also changing, and I'm sure my admissions people feel this pretty significantly, is the experience, what we would call the Amazon experience, right? And I'm feeling this, particularly with my colleagues in advancement and fundraising, that not only do students want the Amazon experience, our donors and people out in the community want the Amazon experience. There is a basic level of expectation that you don't get a communication that says, dear student, right? That you know me. And not that you're writing me a personal email, right? Our students are pretty realistic. I'm looking at our students. We're pretty realistic, right? You know you're not getting a personal email maybe, but having it personalized, that someone knows you, is really key to students and to the experience. And so much of that happens certainly from admissions, but also through our student success initiatives. And so what we see is that 92% of students, according to Target X and Chegg, would like to see communications tailored specifically to them. And that 61% of students expect a response within a day of contacting a college rep. In fact, where we see that the most is with online adult students. Online adult students expect a response within at least 24 hours. And most online adult students actually make a choice about their institution, about the college that they're going to choose, by who first contacted them. And at CampusWorks, we've actually done secret shopper studies where we've looked at online programs and we look at who's communicating with who first in terms of what college. And one of the things that we see is if you get them early, they will most likely be the only institution that you'll ever apply to. And so that really talks about the speed at which students are making decisions. And particularly online adult students, they make decisions very quickly. And so when you look at the for-profits of the world, it's not that they're doing any better than community colleges, right? Their graduation rates are terrible. But what they are doing is this kind of responsiveness and being able to catch people quickly. And that doesn't just happen in the admissions office, but throughout the institution and how we do that. You know, I never thought that this was a problem until I started doing a lot of the SWAT work that we do with community colleges. And I hear from students so often, right? Wi-Fi is kind of like water and food. And we have come to a place, and I love this slide, it says it all, right? That we've come to a place in our world in which everything is Wi-Fi. And I'm guilty of it, right? I just came back from Providence, Rhode Island, and came here, and I was looking around the airport, and I'm driving, and I'm going, I need to find a place with Wi-Fi. I need to find a place with Wi-Fi, right? So I ended up at a Wendy's, right? Because now Wendy's and McDonald's are offering Wi-Fi. It has become such an important part of the experience. And certainly you probably hear it when students can't use the Wi-Fi or things, right? So this has really become, and particularly we talk about this because a lot of times in order to get to those technological expectations, a lot of people don't realize what it takes to build the infrastructure to get there, right? There's a lot of infrastructure that goes in to having next generation operating systems and ERP systems and the systems that are helping students choose classes and are accelerating their academic experience. There's a lot of technological infrastructure that goes into that. And that's something that a lot of institutions have to continue to maintain, right? When you think about roads and bridges, you know that you can't just create them and then let them sit. You got to continue to maintain them. And that's so true of the technological infrastructure at colleges and universities, and something that many of them are dealing with. Another trend that we're seeing is that there is now an emphasis on skills, sometimes to the detriment of credentials. And it's not that employers are poo-pooing credentials and saying that they don't matter, but what they are really after are skill profiles. And they're asking colleges to really consider how they're building student skills. And I'm sure many of you in the academic side feel that, right? How many of you are faculty? Are any of you hearing that from employers about what are the right skills, and we need to make sure that we have those? And so that has allowed for other kinds of programs to come in. When you think about the Googles and the Amazons of the world, who are actually doing their own entry-level training programs, and they're deciding to build their own people up, sometimes to the detriment of community colleges, although Amazon's got a small partnership with community colleges in Virginia. And that may not apply right now to Mohave, right? You may not have an Amazon or Google, but typically what we've seen it do is that it sets the tone for smaller companies to consider those kinds of programs. And so what we are looking at is what is the future of credentialing, right? We are seeing students who are challenged with having to have flexible schedules because they have to work and they have caregiving responsibilities, and they're trying to make their education work in the context of their own lives and from an affordability perspective. And so what we are seeing, right, is credit-bearing degrees, short-term certificates, credit for prior learning, employer-sponsored trainings, boot camps, MOOCs, digital badges, right? There are all these different kinds of credentials that are sometimes competing with higher education. And so what we're really up against as community colleges is how do we look at credentialing? And how do we make sure that the credentials and the skills that we're offering really fit the needs of students? And that we do that in an iterative way. Some institutions are looking at shorter term certificates, and certainly even from the non-credit side, right? How do you build bridges from your non-credit academic work into the credit-bearing side, and you create smaller certificates that get you to degree completion. Because at least if the student has to take a break for a few years, which sometimes they do because of income concerns, or maybe there was a death in the family, they at least have some sort of credential that profile skills for them they can use in employer to help increase their wages. And so it's kind of a step up for them in terms of the wages they can get until they can get to their next milestone for a degree. And this is something that a lot of institutions are facing. And certainly the last trend is the new normal. Change. Change is happening at such a rapid pace. Acceleration. The economy is accelerating. One of the things that we are seeing, particularly to go back to a college that we're working with in Michigan, is that the corporate structures of businesses are changing, right? There used to be this old kind of top-down model and approach to the way that businesses operated, right? The CEO is at the top, and the CEO tells the vice presidents what to do, and the vice presidents tell the managers what to do, or the directors, and they tell the people under them, and that's how work gets done. That's really changing. The fundamental nature of corporations and employers are changing, and we're flattening out structures. And so the CEO is really at the middle of a wheel instead of at the top of a hierarchy. And the CEO is really having to rely on his relationships with vice presidents, but people beyond the vice presidents, to make work happen, right? And some of you have probably heard of Agile, right? That's a big part of it, is technology has been pushing it. But what we have found is that there's a need for cross-functional conversations to happen in corporations. It's the same way that they happen in community colleges. And that kind of shift into the way the corporate structure works means that change is happening at an even rapid pace. Because what these companies realize, and the insight that they had, is if we're going to be adaptable and flexible to the marketplace, we've got to be nimble. And if we're a big, giant guy, we can't do that with a top-down structure very easily. We've got to be able to be flexible and work across reporting lines and work across the company to actually be able to adapt to the change fast enough to do something about it. And that is something that is starting to make its way to community colleges in terms of the way that they are experiencing change. And so one of the things that we will talk a lot about in this process is how do we deal with change? How do we work in an environment where change is so constant and it's not going to let up? One of the models that we use is a model from a company called ProSci, and they have done significant research on change management. And one of the things that they talk about is that for any change initiative to be successful, there are kind of 5 things that we have to have in place to make change successful. And that includes strategic planning. One is awareness. We have to make sure that everyone knows why we're changing. And what is the urgency? What are the things that we're going to come up against if we don't change? The second is desire. Is everyone ready for the change? How are people feeling about the change? Maybe there are questions that you have when we go down this road of change. What does it mean for my job? What's going to change? How am I going to be able to deal with my new responsibilities? Because maybe this might mean I get new responsibilities. The third is knowledge. Do you have the right information to make the change happen? And how do we make sure that you have that information? One of the things that we do a lot with strategic planning implementation is training what we call objective leads, or people who are kind of in charge of objectives. And they go through a training over a year-long process. And in that they have the knowledge to be able to actually see through the objective that they're in charge of. Or if it's a committee, the objective the committee is in charge of. And so that is a big part of change management, is ensuring that people have the knowledge so they can actually make the change happen, which is ability, right? Have we given them the skills that they need to be able to make that change? And then how do we reinforce it? How do we ensure that what we're doing in the organization, that what we often find sometimes is we get into a period where we're in a gray space. We're not quite, it's almost like an acrobat on the trapeze. And you're going to get from one bar, and you've got to fly off from that bar and land on the next. And so you got to go from the old way. You have to let go of the old way to grab onto the new way. But in order to get there, you're kind of in midair, right? You're in midair, and you've got to figure out, are you going to land there or are you not? There's a little bit of anxiety there, perhaps. Maybe if you're seasoned, maybe not. But that anxiety, that mid-air, that place where we haven't quite gotten to the new change, to the new strategic plan, is really what we would call a gray area. And sometimes there can be confusion or anxiety. And sometimes we get some of the best ideas in that space from employees. But what it will mean from a strategic planning perspective is, how do we ensure that we don't go back? We can't go back to the last trapeze. We can't grab onto it and hold onto it by one hand. And sometimes that's what we try to do. And how do we reinforce that? How do we reinforce the change? How do we make sure we stay in a path that's moving us forward, that we don't try to hang back to the old way? And so much of that is the work that colleges are facing now with the new normal and the change that they're experiencing. And so I like to just close with this quote, that many of the problems, this is from Hanover Research, which is another consulting firm, and they primarily work in higher education as well as a few other industries. But one of the things that they say is that many of the problems confronting higher education institutions are new, fast-changing, and incredibly complex. However, they are not insurmountable. Higher education institutions must imagine the graduates they hope to produce and use that vision to construct the tailored education tools and resources needed to do so. So we have a tall order, right? Are you guys ready? Are you ready? Yes, yes. I'm just trying to get you ginned up for lunch. I am the only thing standing between you and a good lunch. But yes, and this is the work that we have to do together. And so I invite you, as we go on this journey together over the next 10 months, that we have these conversations and that we will create the space to have these conversations. Because this is really about how do we make students successful and how do we change Mohave County, right? When you look at Mohave County, and I heard this from a number of people in the educational attainment rate in Mohave County, you have such a powerful opportunity to make a significant impact. And it's not to say that you already haven't made an impact, right? Because you have. And now what we're answering, the big question that we're answering is how do we continue to make a bigger impact as we move forward? Any questions or comments? I covered a lot, right? I gave you PowerPoint PTSD. And I'll wait a second just in case we have some of our friends at Havasu in North Mohave. We have one question here that I'll take, and then I'll ask for anyone who's at the other campuses for questions.
I have a question about your stats on technology and student accessibility to the tech. Since you had mentioned before about potential students of lower incomes who don't necessarily have access to certain things, do you have any numbers on, like, I guess, students who are prevented from accessing higher ed specifically because of tech advancements and how we apply tech in the classroom?
So how is technology sometimes a barrier to students who are in higher education? Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't have stats right off the top of my head. But if you come see me, we can talk about that, and I can share that with you. Absolutely. Any other questions? One of the things I will say about that question, though, is that is, and again, that's part of the strategic planning conversation. And certainly, when we talk about diversity and equity, what are some of the equity initiatives? How do we create a space to have those kinds of conversations, particularly for students and the barriers that kind of get in their way? One of the things that we often look at is how do you tie those kinds of conversations to funding, right? Do you use your philanthropic programs or your budgets in some way to actually be able to provide students with that kind of technology? I can say the institution I worked at, one of the things that we did, we were actually one of the first in the nation to provide iPads to every student. It's a haul. I'm not promising iPads to anyone. Don't get any ideas. But what it was about, largely for us, because I came from an institution that had a very large first-generation, low-income population, was really about leveling the playing field from a technology perspective. And how do you give students that kind of access, as well as training? How do you ensure they are understanding how to use technology in a way that benefits their education?
Justin, I think you'll find that the fine folks at Mohave Community College on all 4 campuses, 5 campuses if you include distance education, are ready, willing, and excited to move to the next level of innovative student success. Now, if you would help us get the Department of Education, the Veterans Services, the state of Arizona, the HLC out of our way, that we can do micro-credentialing, help with scholarships or, Pell grants with low credit period, that sort of thing. I think we're ready. Great. People out of our way. Yes. Those pesky accreditors and but it's a very important point, right? What are the barriers that are getting in your way, and how do you work around them? And how do you use the strategic plan and lean on that to start having some of those conversations? Absolutely, you're absolutely right. Well, great. I only have a few minutes, and before I do, I want to make sure there aren't any other questions at some of the other campuses. Is this going to require me to use Zoom again? We have faith in you.
I'm glad somebody does.
Hey, Justin,
Yes.
I have a person here, Adrian Hammond, that has a question.
Question might be overstating the situation, but maybe just kind of a comment as a minority report, if you will. We talked a lot about change, and I think that's great. We need to be prepared for changes, although we don't know what they are going to be. The cool thing is we do know what the past is. We're dealing with millions of years of human evolution, and while the environment's changed in maybe the last couple hundred pretty significantly, there's governing dynamics around human behavior that probably aren't going to change a lot. And I think we can build a social matrix around, providing a safe, beautiful, and meaningful learning environment where kids can come together and socialize and discover themselves and discover each other and discover the world. And if we built, all the other things that we want to try to create inside of that matrix, I think we could really be pretty nimble and agile in addressing the changes that are going to happen. And the other thing is cost accounting. It kind of looks like we don't want our peas to touch our carrots very badly. And very badly, we want our peas to not touch our carrots. And yet there's lines of interest that overlap, and we could really get a lot more out of our dollars if we could create innovative and dynamic ways to still be accountable and transparent, but let a dollar do more than just one thing at one time. Does that make sense?
Yes. I just want to make very clear to you that you have a group here of really hungry people. So talking about peas and carrots is not a great analogy right now. But absolutely. And I would say, to your first point, one of the things that we are seeing when we talk about trends is what is the role of faculty and student services professionals when you talk about creating that meaningful environment? Because certainly, the role of teacher is changing, and students are really needing, when we talk about soft skills and we talk about communication skills, that teaching and learning in the traditional classroom environment is really not everything that's going to take students the distance. It's certainly one part of it, but another part of it is, how are we becoming mentors to our students, right? How are we teaching them communication skills? How are we giving them those opportunities for us to be role models to them? And so the real center of the educational experience for students and certainly for you all is not about, do we get all the credits? It's certainly one part of it. Do they have all the credits at the right time? Do they have developmental education at the right time? But really about the relationship with students. And I think you so beautifully articulated that we always have to keep that in mind, that the most effective teaching tool that we have at any institution is our relationship with our students. And to your second point about cost accounting, now that you've sobered us up from the beautiful aspect of talking about relationships, is how do we look at the strategic plan to help create focus from that accounting perspective? And when you look at implementation of a strategic plan, this is what I really mean when we talk about not having a strategic plan that sits on a shelf, but that is actually going to guide the institution's decisions, because the choices that we are going to make when we put them in the strategic plan mean that we've made choices to not put other things in the strategic plan. And that's really what strategy is about. When you hear from Michael Porter, who is really the strategy guy at Harvard Business School, one of the things that he says is strategy is about making choices, and it's also about the choices that you didn't make. And so when you think about cost accounting and you think about some of those parts of the process from a strategic planning point of view, what we hope this process will be is really a process that channels and focuses those decisions, right? That you are putting resources, and not just finances, but skills and time. Time is probably one of the most important resources that you have here at the institution in your time. And how do you funnel that time and focus and channel it? And so that is really, when we get to the implementation, when the rubber meets the road, that is really where we hope the strategic plan will be of value to the institution, is helping to channel and focus all of that. So thank you for your comments. We are at about 3 minutes from lunch, so the countdown begins. And what I want to do is just very briefly, if I can get back to PowerPoint, very briefly, just describe what we're going to do with the student experience statement. And I'm relying on help this time. I'm calling in the big guns. Perfect. Thank you. I think you need a round of applause. Because it wasn't me, right? We would have eaten up all 3 minutes to slide number 1. So one of the things that we're going to do, we're ready to dig in, right? I heard Stephen say, let's do it. Let's go. Let's make this happen. So we're going to create a student experience and talk about what does the compelling experience look like for Mohave Community College students. And so the thing that we're going to do today together when we come back from lunch is to create what a compelling experience looks like. And our friends at Havasu, Bullhead City, and North Mohave are also going to do the same thing. And we're going to grab all of the feedback from all of the campuses and help you create a compelling student experience statement. It's going to be 1 page about what does the ideal student experience look like. One of the things that we often see when we're talking about the student experience is really how we see it from our lens. So today, what we're going to invite you to do is to sit with people that you don't normally sit with, or people that are not from your same area, or people that you don't know in the room. Because what we want you to be able to do is talk about how do you see the student experience from your own room, or from your own perspective. I don't know why I said room. Thinking of Room with a View, which is an old novel for my English professors in here. But how do you see it from your particular perspective? And one of the things that we're going to answer is, what are the big barriers that get in the way of student success? So you're going to have some time to talk about what are those boulders, right? What are the big rocks that get in the way? And from your perspective as a faculty or staff member, or from your perspective as a student, what have you seen the things that kind of get in the way that impact your success as a student? I love this, right? And I'm making you even more hungry. We've got carrots and peas, and now the big dessert. But what we want you to do, we did that vision exercise, is what is an ambitious, ideal student experience look like? So think about that, right? I want you to be the baby chomping on watermelon and try to chomp as much as you can until you get to your capacity. And part of this, we talked a little bit about change. You'll continue to see the slide a little bit. When we talk about the student experience, we know that change is going to happen. And we know that things may not be what they are today, and that's okay. And like I said, from the trapeze, there might be a point in time when we are trying to make the student experience a reality, where we're going to be caught midair. And it's a period of anxiety, but it's also a period of great creativity. And so as you think about this, keep that in mind. Because ultimately, what we want to be able to do, this actually comes from a book about what elephants can teach us, teach humans about freedom. One of the things that we know when we create the student experience, sometimes we have to kind of shelve the assumptions and the thoughts that we have. And that's the great thing about the cross conversations that we'll have. One of the things we know about elephants is, particularly in the circus environment or zoo environments, they'll attach a rope to a baby elephant to kind of keep it contained. And so the baby elephant keeps the rope on its leg and it tries to walk and it stops, right? And the baby elephant continues to do that and continue to do that. And sometimes the things that are holding us back, we talked a little bit about accreditation and some of those things. How do we think about those ropes? And how do we ensure that we think from a futuristic perspective? How do we push ourselves to think beyond that when we're creating the student experience so that we're not held on by the rope? And so we ask, can elephants dance? And if we took the rope off, what we know about elephants, this is actually a true story, by the way, I'm not making this up, is that they will only go as far as the rope wants to go. They will not go further until someone shows them that they can. And so this is really our opportunity to dance. Because as I've said earlier, you all are merchants of hope. So with that, I will let you to lunch. I don't know, Sean, if there are any special instructions
Just
for lunch.
Right by Rosie are those who have special dietary needs, and those lunches are there. Also, Michelle, can you help me out? Kind of specialty sandwiches over here?
Well, we've got the turkey on that end, and then there's VLP. John, I don't know what the beef John is this holiday. And then over here on this table, we've got the pepe, which is with ham, so wheat bread and the regular. Unwich, turkey tom unwich, Baby John's, veggies, and Vito.
Great deal. And there's a water cooler right there. All right. Have at it.
Great. And we will reconvene at 12:30. So we'll come back at this room, correct?
Yeah.
We'll stay put here. Thank you, everybody.
What's that? Yes, we can close the Zoom now, correct? And just reopen it for the 3 o'clock. What's that? We don't actually need to communicate for the next couple hours.
The thing is, I can't close the session. Pause it.
Oh, pause will be fine.
Okay.
All right.
So what do you think of the session?
Good.